Today we start chapter 3 of book 3, which is law of labor. We study the natural or divine laws. And the first law was law of adoration or worship. And the second law, chapter 2. And now we start law of labor, the necessity of labor. And it's not a very long chapter. We may finish today and even start the next one. Okay. Philip, can you read for us?
Yes, I can. Law of labor, necessity of labor. Is the necessity of labor a law of nature? Labor is a law of nature and is proved by the fact that it is a necessity. Civilization requires humankind to perform a greater amount of labor because it increases the sum of their needs and pleasures.
So first here, we need to define labor, right? Because when we think about labor, we immediately think about work. And it's not work in the sense that it's most commonly understood, which is a paid work or a voluntary work. Labor here, and it's any useful activity to help us grow morally and intellectually. This is the definition of labor. If you are reading a book that is helping you evolve intellectually, you are working, right? So that's very important for us to understand the whole concept. Of course, paid work is also a necessity in the world we live, and we're going to get into more of that. But when the spirits say here, labor is a law of nature, meaning it's a natural law, it's God's law. God's law is perfect, so labor belongs to one of the perfect laws of God. And what the spirits continue saying, that civilization requires humankind to perform a greater amount of labor because it increases the sum of their needs and pleasures. We know, as we study the evolution of humankind, that the evolution was done through labor. We can go into all the problems we created with labor, slavery, forced labor, lack of labor by the rich classes. But the concept, it's interesting, I was reading today, the concept of labor that to benefit others and to help us grow was introduced by Jesus. There wasn't the concept before Jesus didn't exist. Before Jesus, labor was done by slaves, and slave owners wouldn't work. So they would slave, the people that dominate others would force others to work for them, and they wouldn't work. The concept of working as a productive means of us growing, evolving intellectually and morally was kind of widespread by Christianity, by the teachings of Jesus, right? Of course, Christianity then also became a problem with the interpretations and the way that they conducted the work. But I didn't know that, and I thought it was very interesting, the concept of labor as we know it was brought by Jesus. And if you study the teachings of Jesus, you understand that, right? Because when he says love one another, love God, and all the parables that he mentions, workers and laborers, he doesn't. He never mentions slavery or anything like that, right? He mentions that we are all the same. We are all brothers and sisters. We need to love one another. These are all concepts that Jesus brought in terms of developing what was already brought earlier by Moses and by the other prophets, right? Okay. Any questions here, comments? Okay, I see Philip is talking on his phone, so we'll wait for him to come back so he can read. Or I'll read the 675. Should we understand labor to mean only occupations of a material nature? No. The spirit labors just like the body. Every sort of useful occupation is labor. And that's the concept that we discussed here, right? But the key word here is useful. Any work or any occupation that helps us or others, well, if we are helping others, we're growing. So any occupation that helps, that makes us grow, it's labor in the sense of the natural law. Even, you know, if at the time of Kardec, there was still a lot of manual labor. Of course, today we have manual labor, still a lot. But at the time of Kardec, there was almost only manual labor, and there were still rich people wouldn't do manual labor and wouldn't work, many of them, right? You had the nobility in Europe. They didn't work, right? Even here in this country, you had the, you know, when they became the would-be billionaires, they were working, but mostly making others do the labor work, right? Nowadays, more and more we have intellectual work, right? A lot of the work that is done nowadays is not labor intensive in the sense that we are working there with our sweat, right? So you have a lot of work that is sitting behind the desk. Again, we're generalizing. We're not going to details. Some is more productive than others. Some is more important than others, of course. But as humanity evolves, we are moving away from manual labor only and more into intellectual labor. And why is that? Because we are progressing as spirits. So the more we evolve, the less we need to work manually. We are using robots, we are creating machinery to do the work, you know, the repetition work that it's very tiring and not very not very instructive in the sense, right? If you remember old timers, the famous Charles Chaplin movie, right? Modern Times, right? The workers at that working all the, and he was making fun of that. That type of work, we are more and more moving away from it. Of course, it still exists, right? There is a lot of work that requires labor, right? When you are building the construction, it's still done mostly by manual labor work, right? You have machinery help, but still a lot of agriculture, still a lot of labor work, but there is a lot of machinery also in the agriculture, right? At the time of Kardec, it was all manual. There were horses or helping a little bit. We're beginning to use horses and other animals to help us with agriculture, but nowadays it's mostly with tractors and trucks and things like that, right? So that shows our progress as humankind, right? Again, the progress is not a linear progress. We go with you know, strugglings and injustices and all these things that we correct as we go with the struggles that we have to face. And the struggles, you know, if we understand us as eternal spirits, we understand that those that are struggling today are struggling either for an atonement of their previous abuses, or as a learning experience to grow, right? So you can imagine a slave owner of the 19th century working in a slave type of work today, if they haven't learned from that time to this time the errors of their ways, right? So sometimes because you don't learn, you end up having to experience the other side on a reincarnation, right? So again, it's for us to understand that the struggles that we go through, there are always two reasons: either an atonement or an expiation for our mistakes in the past, or an opportunity to learn and grow, right? Which is also why we're here, the tribes, right? So there are those more elevated spirits that reincarnate amongst the less evolved spirits here, the less developed countries and places, to serve as an example to them. So they could be working, struggling in the work there, but working as an example to others with the seriousness, with the commitment, with the resignation. These are all examples for the spirits around them. So that's also something that can happen. You see someone working, doesn't necessarily mean atonement, doesn't necessarily mean trial, could be as a way to help those around. Okay. All right.
Shall I read 5 and 6?
No, I already read 5, so it's just 6 now.
Okay. Why is labor forced upon humankind? It is a consequence of your physical nature. It is an atonement and means of developing your intelligence. Without labor, you would remain in the early stages of intelligence. This is why your food, safety, and well-being all rely entirely on your labor and activity. Those whose bodies are too weak for tougher kinds of work are granted intelligence by God to compensate for it, but it is labor nonetheless.
So when we talk about why do we have to work, right? The answer from the spirits, it's a means of developing our intelligence and an atonement, what we just discussed, right? The reality, and I mentioned this many times, right? Without having to work to survive, if we didn't, we wouldn't evolve. Not at this stage of our evolution, because we are too lazy. That's the reality, right? If something is given to us for free, the majority of us does not make any effort. One of the reasons that communism doesn't work is this, because you divide the riches amongst everybody, and people, when they don't need to make an effort, the majority, again, there are exceptions, but the majority of us, we're lazy. We're imperfect spirits and we're lazy. And if everything is given to us, we're not going to make an effort. Again, generalize. There is always the exceptions. There are those that work. There are more evolved spirits that understand the necessity of work. But in the world that we live today, the world of trials and expiations, the reality is that we don't make an effort. And you can look, for instance, countries that have different temperatures, right? Colder and warmer temperatures in big countries like Brazil, the US. Regions where are more warmer are less developed in general, because you don't need to work to protect yourself against the environment. You can live without making much of an effort, because you are not going to die of cold, you are not going to die. So you see the developed worlds in general. Again, there are exceptions, we're just talking general here. You see the countries around the equator are less developed than the countries in the north and the south, right? Because people are more forced, in a sense, to work to develop ways to protect themselves. So that's a sign still of a world of trials and expiations when we move into a world of.
That's a fact that you're saying that.
Yeah,
countries where they attempt a
yeah.
kind of climate ban, I would say.
Yeah,
I usually are more progressive than the ones in
It's,
Target and Warner.
yeah, but again,
It's different things. I mean, there's lots of historical factors and like.
no, there is a lot of other factors that go into it. Yes, and again, I'm talking in general with not specifics. There are exceptions, right? I'm not saying that all the countries that are hot are, you know, underdeveloped. I'm just saying in general, and I can talk about Brazil.
So
The most developed part of Brazil is the south and southeast. The northeast, which is warmer, is less developed. Again, it has nature factors also because it has more desert, more difficult for agriculture. So there are other factors like you were saying, but
Immigration, like if you go to Paraguay, it's even colder than the south of Brazil. And they're like.
no, Paraguay is very hot.
Paraguay is hot.
Oh yes, I've been to Asunción and it was like
But in the
100.
Really?
No,
I mean, yeah, I mean, but as I said before, it's an interplay of things, like it's a cultural things, like being colonized.
yeah,
Northern Europeans or like.
yeah, no, it's in general, but even if you take South America, right? What are the most developed countries in South America? Now Argentina is falling down the drain, but it was Argentina, Chile, Uruguay, and the south of Brazil, much more than Colombia, Venezuela, the north, Bolivia.
You have to consider the majority of like people there, they are like French descent, Italian descent.
They're all Spanish colonization.
Spanish.
They're all Spanish colonization. All except Brazil, they're all Spanish colonization.
I know, but like you see the influx of like men like Italians and Germans.
In
and that
Argentina.
kind of thing.
Everywhere.
And then you see.
Yeah, I know, I understand that, but what I'm stating here, I'm not trying to discriminate, to discriminate against any country or region. I'm just saying a fact, right? If you look at the most developed countries in the world, they are in the north and they are in the south. Australia, New Zealand.
Italy, if you go to the north and when you go to the south.
Italy. Yeah, it's a good example. Also, Italy, the north is much more developed than the south, right?
But, yeah.
Again, I'm not trying to discriminate against anyone here. I'm just talking about, it goes back to our example that if things are easier, we make less of an effort.
And that's human nature.
Yes.
It's human nature. We are like that. Like,
Yeah, and that's exactly my point here, that human nature, we are lazy by nature, right? We, again, the majority. Of course, there is a lot of exceptions.
That's the generalization itself, what you say,
Yes,
in nature, because mankind has never found itself in nature.
sorry?
Mankind, human beings have never found themselves in nature, really. They've always been within a social context. So when we say in nature, it's really a speculation on our part, which is an intelligent guess, but still speculation. Because human beings have always been found in social context.
Yes, yeah.
And once you're in social context, you're not in nature.
Yeah,
Think of that,
as,
think of that.
but where we started civilization when humankind started civilization, when they stopped moving around, they start settling in places. That's when we start.
They start being
Yeah,
from what's called nomad.
yeah. When they stopped being nomads and started being nomads. Nomads.
No, it's a word, yeah, but still in that nomadic structure, they were still in social context.
See,
That's
yes,
the whole thing.
living in society, yes, but it was the very, very
Yeah, you would call it a primitive society.
primitive society.
Yeah, primitive society, but you could not say, that's the theory of Hobbes and Rousseau, of the talking about man in nature. But those philosophers were so unknown. You know, they were actually speculating in this philosophy, just extrapolating things that given this, I can extrapolate or go backwards. But the human beings have always been, we are sort of called animals.
Yes, starting from the primitive, because we don't know much before before 10.
History started what, 5,000 years ago?
And well, 10,000 years ago.
It started in the big beach before the Common Era, 3,000 and 2,000 in the Common Era. Altogether about 5,000.
Yeah, according to Emmanuel, the big immigrations was like 10,000 years ago, right? That came from Capella, the other solar system, the spirits that immigrated and helped humankind to jump into the evolution was like 10,000 years ago. It's more or less when we started agriculture. We moved from only hunting and fishing to start developing agriculture. That's when humankind started progressing.
If you go to the machine of natural history and you walk that spiral like this, history is just like the last runway, all that. You know, you come down like 3 flights and you're almost to the runway, like it's like nothing as compared to all that.
Yeah. Yeah, if you look, we talk. You like to talk about that, right? The eternity compared to 1 minute. Our life is 1 minute into eternity.
That's good. I like that.
We talk about 10,000.
Our life is an instant, and I think so. You find that period of time that is finished the moment it starts. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
It is true.
Okay. Questions, comments? All right. Next is 677. You're on mute, Phil.
Why does nature itself provide for all the wants of animals? Everything in nature labors. The animals work as much as you do, but their work, like their intelligence, is limited to providing for their own survival. This is why labor does not lead to progress in animals. While among human beings, it has a double purpose of preserving the body and developing thought, which is also necessary, and continually raises them to a higher level. When I say that the labor of animals is limited to their survival, I mean that this is their purpose in working. They unconsciously support the views of the Creator when they provide for their material needs. Their labor contributes to nature's final end, although you often fail to realize its immediate result.
So when we talk about animals laboring or working, right? The easy example that we can remember is the bees, right? Because we see the result of the work. But all animals work in the sense they are trying to survive. And this is work in the most ample sense that we try to convey here since the beginning of the discussion, right? That everything that helps us evolve and as humans is work. In the animal phase, it's the survival. They are also evolving. So by trying to learn using their instinct for self-preservation, they try to fight for food, they try to survive. And it is labor, even if we don't see it clear as labor, because when we think about cockroach, for instance, right? What does a cockroach is laboring into, right? But it is, a cockroach is trying to survive. And it goes into the little holes in our houses, they're trying to find food. Yeah. So, but again, when we think about bees, going back to bees, which is the easy and more relatable to us because they are producing honey and what's the name of the other thing? No, cera,
Wax.
wax. Yes, thank you. So they are producing things that are useful to us. So it's easier for us to see work there, right? There's a famous fable, right? The bees and the forgot the name.
Birds.
Cicada.
Yeah, cicada, the cicada and the bees. Yes, it's from one of the.
Lavoisier.
No, it's not Lavoisier. And Anderson, J. Anderson, or I don't know. Anyways, compares a lazy cicada with a working bee, right? But
In the winter, like.
yeah, and then in the winter, the bees are all protected. Yeah, it's an interesting fable. Anyways, we see the result of the bees because it's directly related to us. But the bees don't know that they are working for us. They are just doing what they are supposed to do, what they've been doing forever, right? That's where we don't see progress in animals, right? Because the wolves have been hunting since we heard of wolves, and it's always the same. The bees have been producing honey since always. The birds have been pollinating from one flower to the other, helping nature progress forever without any progress. But without any progress for the animal class, but not the spiritual principle that is going through the animal phase is progressing. Okay. Sorry?
La Fontaine.
La Fontaine.
Jean
Thank you.
Lafontaine.
Yes, thank you. La Fontaine, the fable. Yeah. So we have to differentiate that, right? The bees are always bees, but the spiritual principle, which ends up eventually being becoming an individual spirit when we become humans, they are going through the learning phase, and in the learning phase through the animals, they are learning through the instinct and using the instinct to help them progress. Okay, I hope the difference was clear there, right? The bees are not evolving. The spiritual principle in going through the bees is evolving. Okay, yeah.
It's important to make that.
Yes.
clarification.
Yeah, otherwise you think that a
Yeah.
bee will always be a bee, and yeah, a bee will always be a bee, but the spiritual principle that is going there is
Yeah.
changing constantly.
Growing.
Yes. Okay.
6, 7, 8.
Yeah.
In more advanced worlds, are human beings subject to the same requirement to work? The nature of labor is always relative to wants. The less material those wants, the less material the labor. It is erroneous to think that human beings in those worlds are inactive and useless, since idleness would be a torture rather than a luxury.
Yes. So a concept that the spirits bring here that we haven't discussed, right? We talked about labor being important, being part of our evolutionary path, and we'll continue work when we're back in the spiritual world, as we read in André Luiz books, right? The work that they do there. What is the opposite? What is not working? Yes, but we all want to take vacations, right? Everybody that works want to take vacations. Most of the people, there are some workaholics that don't like to take vacations.
Yeah, that's true.
But
But that's an addiction.
that's
An addiction.
an addiction, exactly. That's a problem also. But eternal idleness, can you imagine? Not doing anything all the time, forever? That's, yes. Waiting the white wall become red, yellow. So work will always be present in our evolution. will always be part of our evolutionary path. Here, back in the spiritual world, back in the new incarnation, when we live in happy worlds, the difference is the more we evolve, the less work feels like an obligation, and the more it feels like part of who we are,
I like that.
right? When you read Nosso Lar, you read somewhere there that the governor of Nosso Lar has been working for 200 years nonstop. And for us, and when we read that, you say, how can you work for 200 years nonstop? Because for us, it's still far away to understand. But for him, it's just natural. It's part of who he is, right?
But you find people here like artists and athletes, that do work and they find so much joy in what they're doing that they just can't fly.
That's our objective, right? Ideally, everybody would work in something that gives them joy, right? But we'll get there. A happy world will be where everybody works in works that give them joy, that give them pleasure. Because of that, you don't need vacations. Because when you are doing something that you are happy all the time, why do you take a break from that? So yeah, that's the future. But nowadays, again, world of trials and atonements, or trials and expiations. Atonements and expiations, the work being hard and being an effort, requiring us to commit. It's not pleasure. Because it's a way of growing, until we reach a point that if we are not working because we don't need to, we will work anyway. Until we reach that, we'll still need to be forced to work, in a sense. We, humankind, right? We're talking about humankind here, not in general, not the exceptions, right? So until humankind learns to work to help one another, that everybody, all different works deserve the same respect and the same reward, we are going to still struggle, some of us, in our work. But you're right, Paco. There are people that are already working, for their own enjoyment and takes pleasure in their work. But even those still like vacations, meaning that we're still not there.
Yeah, this is the dimension that only creation.
Yeah.
So you see a few that are kind of dedicated to what they're doing and they get going.
Yeah, you read, some musicians, some people that play sports professionally, they do.
What's the name? The one from India? She was doing it great. Or she
Mother Teresa?
Yeah, she was.
Yes, but that's a more evolved spirit.
But my point is that, you're not gonna find many, but you're gonna find some.
Yes. Oh, yes, definitely. Yeah.
In fact, those are the ones that they're as example.
Yes. They come here to serve as models to us, as to push us forward, right? But
We need them. Because
yeah.
otherwise
we go back to being primitive, or okay.
I have a comment.
Sure.
I think also the more evolved you get, probably the type of work that comes actually is not that important, right? More important than your attitude for the work that gives you. The experience that the more involved you get, the work make you happy because your attitude for it is so completely different, right? It doesn't matter what kind of work you serve.
Yes. I don't know if you guys heard, he's kind of far from, he said that when you are more evolved spirit, the type of work would make less of a difference, right? And your desire to work is more what makes the difference, and you would work in anything that you can be helpful, right? You see some indications on that on André Luiz, right? When he finds he's there in the hospital and he was a doctor and he finds that he knows nothing about medicine in the spiritual world. So he volunteers to clean the floors, right? Or something like that. But already, you know, enjoying the work that he's doing. You see that when you understand the concept of us as evolving spirits, you will be more inclined and accept the work that comes to you as a reward in itself, right? But we're not there yet. Okay.
679.
Yeah.
Are there any individuals who possess enough worldly goods for survival to render them exempt from the law of labor? Perhaps from material labor, but not from the obligation of making themselves useful according to their means and developing their own intelligence and that of others, which is also labor. There are individuals to whom God has granted sufficient means that are not restricted to earning their income by the sweat of their brows. In that case, their obligation of being useful to their fellow beings is all the greater because they have at their disposal a much greater amount of free time for doing good.
Yes. Again, we have to. This question, of course, applies to today as much as it did at the time of Kardec. But at the time of Kardec, you had the nobility that had wealth and didn't really work, right? So the question is directly at them at that time. The responsibility that you have, if you don't need to work to survive, is much greater than if you need to work to survive. Because if you have enough money not to need to work, then your obligation to help others is much greater. So work there, the labor there is to be useful to society. And that's where many of the wealthy individuals fail in their incarnations, when they don't take this responsibility. But there are many that do, right? You have some billionaires that do some very useful work for society. Again, with the imperfections that we all have. We're not perfect spirits, so we're not going to do perfect work. But there are, you know, you take Bill Gates, for instance, nowadays. What is he doing? He's working almost only for charity. You know, he still owns one of the largest companies in the world, but his personal work is to help others, right? His former wife, Melinda Gates, the largest donor of money to organizations in need, right? In assistance. So these are individuals. Again, we're not saying that they are perfect. They are not. They are imperfect spirits like us, but they are already using what they have to help humanity, right? I was reading today. You know, Dr. Bezerra de Menezes is one of the most famous spiritists from the early spiritism in Brazil, right? That's still the spiritual guide of many spiritist centers and many organizations. When he went back to the spiritual world, and he was received there, of course, with a lot of happiness. There was a large number of spirits that were there, and he mentioned to the companions that he had there, who are all those spirits that I never met them? Who are they? And the answer was, these are the spirits that you helped that were already in the spiritual world through your prayers, through your work in mediumship meetings, or through your work in. They are all here to receive you. So, you know, we are doing the work. If we are doing the work of helping, we are helping beyond what we can see. We're helping those also, those in the spiritual world. Here, when we are here studying, we are 10 here, but there are, I don't know, 50, 100 spirits that are here with us, learning, studying with us, that we are all benefiting with our vibrations, with our discussions, questions, doubts. Yes. So all of this work, what we're doing here is work, right?
Exactly.
The definition, yes, is labor. What we're studying here, we're studying here. We're trying to learn. We're trying to improve ourselves. So we're working, right? And by working, we are helping ourselves and helping others, because we, as a group, you know, each question, each discussion helps the others and helps the spirits that are here also to learn and to improve with us. Okay. Questions there? No. All right.
680.
Yes.
Are there individuals who are incapable of working and whose existence is entirely useless? God is fair. God only condemns those who are voluntarily useless, because such an individual lives off of the labor of others. God wants every person to make themselves useful according to their own abilities. Siggy number 643.
So the natural laws, when the spirits say God only condemns, the natural laws create consequences for those that are voluntarily useless, right? If you spend your whole incarnation being completely useless, you are going to create serious consequences for yourself. You are still evolving because the law is of progress. So what are you learning? You are learning not to be useless in the next incarnation or in the future. So it's still some progress there. Very little, but it's progress, right? So those that are incapable of working, immediately I think of Steve Hawkins, right? Yes. The one, yeah, multiple sclerosis that couldn't move. I don't know what was his disease. And look at the work he left behind. He was working 24/7 in the mind, right? And trying to produce something with all the limitations. It will be very easy for someone like him to just let it go, right?
Yeah.
To just give up. You cannot do anything, you cannot move, but your mind is working. You can work using the resources you have. And that's what they say here. We work according to our limitations. And that's what matters in our progress, right? If you reach a point you can no longer physically work, you can do other things. And the limitations of, and we are going, the next item is the limit of labor rest, which is also very important. Is according to our possibilities. And that's what it's important here. God wants every person to make themselves useful according to their own abilities. So, I'm not trying to teach quantum physics, because it's going to be a disaster for me and the others, right? So we have our own limitations, and we have to understand and accept our limitations and be useful according to our own limitations. And it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, because sometimes we want to be better, to do better, but we have to accept that we are imperfect spirits and we have our limitations, because with that, it will be easier for us to accept our own imperfections and our own struggles, right? Okay.
681.
Yep.
Does natural law impose an obligation upon children to work for their parents? Of course, just as it imposes on parents the duty of working for their children. For this reason, God has created filial and parental affection so that the family members may be naturally led to mutually help each other, a duty that is too often lost in the world today.
Yes, we have responsibilities towards our loved ones, parents to kids and kids to parents. Parents to kids is more natural, comes more naturally because you love your children, most of the cases, the vast majority, and you want to provide for them, right? Kids to parents, or when you become adult to your parents, then you see more issues, leaving their parents behind or having other problems. But the Spirit says here very clear, the natural law imposes an obligation upon children to work for the parents, as imposes on parents the duty to work for the children. Meaning, a parent that leaves their child behind, which is, you see some fathers much more than mothers, right? Leaving kids behind. They are creating karma for them, a consequence, right? Children that leave their parents behind also, you are going against the natural law. Whenever you go against natural law, you create serious consequences for you. You have to face the consequences. And what are the consequences? You can come in the next incarnation without parents that will take care of you, end up in an orphanage, can be a consequence of neglecting your parents in a previous incarnation. Or you can, you can come with parents that mistreat you, or that force you to work. There are serious consequences, and the other way around also, right? If you mistreat your parents, you are going to come.
But that's not also the silver lining issue, that you may say serious consequences. What is the way of also?
Everything is learning, right? Eventually.
Yeah, that's my
Yeah.
point, that, in terms of, my point is that karma is the opportunity that we all have to better ourselves. So we have to start looking at it in terms of punishment.
Yes.
Let's not look at it in terms of punishment, but as an opportunity. Like if I don't treat my kid right, in my next life, I won't be treated right. But it's not a matter of punishing me.
It's a consequence.
It's a consequence of what I'm doing, that I'm going to eventually learn from that myself.
Yeah.
Hopefully in the next one.
Yeah. It could be, the consequence could be you're trying to have kids and not being able to have kids, right? That's one of the possible consequences. Daniela, you raise your hand.
I don't know how even to ask. It seems that this natural law is very much attached to the culture of the place. Like some cultures, the children are taught or nourished to take more care of their parents, even since their childhood. This exchange is more natural. And then in some cultures, it's more the parents have the obligation. Once the kids grow up and find their own lives, it's sort of like done. And the children don't feel necessarily a moral obligation to take care of their parents. Like culturally,
Yes.
in general, it's why is so attached to culture and not to, for example, the labor, right? It's a natural law. So we work one way or another. We are working for survival, to help family, etc. But this exchange seems to be very different depending on the culture we look at.
Yeah, but that.
I think what she's comparing to is actually the extended family system versus the nuclear type of family system. The extended type, mother, father, uncle, nephew, is a big one. The nucleotype, which is the Anglo-Saxon type, is mother, father, and child. And we tend in the nuclear family to pick the kid up. You have to be independent. Okay, while in the extended type, we tend to embrace the child, the grandchild, the great grandchild, and we tend to be much more kind of some people say, well, the extended type looks at children and grandchildren as their life insurance.
Yeah,
They're gonna work for us. But it seems, to me, it seems that they are mutually exclusive. But intent from this perspective, whatever measure you take within that context to provide for your parents is still the same. Because, you know, in the nuclear family, you would say the nuclear family system, okay, I'm independent, my parents are independent, my grandchildren are independent, but still will have some kind of responsibility towards her. And you have it in those communities like, what you call that, CRR, communities, they're nursing homes and they have independent living, so children and grandchildren help the grandparents to live in those communities in which they do have.
yeah.
So I mean, my point is that even though culturally there are differences, doesn't take away from what is it saying. That's my point.
Yeah, and every culture has its own different views and how to deal with different things. And yes, Daniela is right. You know that some cultures are better at keeping families together and taking care of each other. The respect for the elderly in Japan, for instance, is much greater than here. On the other hand, the respect for women in Japan is not as good as here, for instance. The right women has less rights there than here. So, in the Arab world, so it's culturally, and you have advantages and disadvantages according to different cultures. But you know, the concept that is in the natural law is that parents are supposed to take care of their children, children are supposed to take care of the parents. Anything that deviates from that goes against the natural law. Anything that helps build on that, you are working within the natural law.
That's really a corollary of the major principle that we are here to help each other.
Yes, love one another without any yeah.
It's the same principle.
And if you think of us moving towards a universal family, everyone helps everyone else, right? So you don't, theoretically there, you don't need parents to take care of the kids and vice versa, because everybody takes care of everyone. But that's theoretically, because we don't really know if it's the reality.
Happens every so often. I mean, I'm not no saints, and at this point on my way to the center, I would have in my neighbor to go to his he had a cataract, before I brought him to the medical office, which is a few blocks. That's not a major.
No, it's we you know, we help each other. Yes, we already have the concept of helping each other, but in terms of universally helping everybody helping everybody, we are way far from it, right? That's yeah, we see, of course, and that's how everybody's going to do it one day, eventually. But we're still.
We all become.
But we still need to be reminded nowadays that that's a natural law, and we have to follow the natural law.
We got the built and forget.
Yes. So let's see here. One thing, yeah. Let's start limit of labor. I don't know if we have time to finish it, but let's go a couple of questions there. Philip.
682. As rest after labor is a necessity, is it a law of nature? Definitely. Rest restores the bodily powers and is also necessary to give a little more freedom to the mind, allowing it to rise above matter.
Okay, so I just wanted to start here because we have only 4 minutes left, but I want to introduce the concept of rest, right? For us to think about it, right? Incarnated, we need rest because our physical body needs rest. If we abuse our physical body, we are going against the natural law, because theoretically, our physical body needs to be in the best possible shape for us to be useful to society. Because if we get sick, we become a burden to society instead of being useful to society. So for our body to be fully operational, it needs rest, right?
Yes.
That's here in this physical world. In the spiritual world, evolved spirits don't need rest. But we see André Luiz talking about spirits sleeping, spirits resting, right? Why? Because it's the mind, the mind gets, everything is in the mind of the spiritual world. And less evolved spirits get tired mentally. We see people working here that you get tired mentally after an effort, right? So, but here your physical body gets tired, your mind gets tired. In the spiritual world, there's no physical body. There is the spiritual body that doesn't get tired, but your mind gets tired and you need rest there, because still, again, going back to the governor of Nosso he's been working for 200 years. Does he rest? He doesn't mention, but I believe that probably he does a little bit, right? Maybe resting is listening to music. I don't know, something. But for us, if we go back to the spiritual world tomorrow, we are there working. We will need rest because mentally we will need rest. We need breaks.
It will be like bringing a residual kind of sensation from physicality.
Yeah, because of our level of evolution, still as imperfect spirits, we still cannot work 100% of the time. Our mind does not allow us to work 100% of the time. We're not ready to do that. Eventually we'll be, but at this stage, we're not ready. So we need rest there also, as we need rest here.
Okay. That means that just because you die, it doesn't mean that you're going to develop or evolve.
Yeah, you're still the same. It's the same, right? Maybe with a little bit more understanding, because you went through the process of discarnation, meaning you went back to the spiritual world. It really opens a little bit your understanding, if you are ready to do that, because some spirits are not ready. They just wake up there without any understanding or awareness. But if you are ready, understands the concept of going back to the spiritual world, that life continues, we are eternal souls. The moment we go through the perturbation phase, which happens to all of us, you become aware of a bigger picture of you as an eternal spirit, that the physical body restrains it. But that's basically it. You're still the same. If you didn't like something here, you continue not liking it there, right? Your prejudices, you carry them, your imperfections, right? But
hopefully, with this studies, we tend to evolve.
Yeah,
We tend to be more.
we tend to be, but we still carry.
We still carry it,
Yeah.
I feel myself like much better when I first started here. You understand?
I hope so. We all hope so.
Yeah. I do.
Yes,
Don't you?
yes,
Don't you?
we should be, right? If you are coming here for 20 years and didn't get better than when you first start, something is wrong with you or with us here, because something we're not doing right? We are supposed to be learning and evolving.
Well, the point is that I'm feeling it, that's my point.
Yes, which is good.
Yeah, I do when I talk to some of my friends. Where have you been?
Okay, so we stop here. Just a reminder of what we have this weekend. The lecture that we have on Saturday at 11 a.m. is by our friend Bernadette Leal from California. She works with education, and her subject will be A Life with Purpose. So this Saturday, 11 a.m. The following Saturday, November 5th, we will be in Houston, Texas for the 16th Spiritist Symposium and the 25th anniversary of the United States Spiritist Federation.
Wow.
It'll be a whole day event. You can watch it online. We will send the links and everything next week. Okay, it'll be from 9 to 5
On Saturday,
on Saturday, November 5th.
in English.
In English, everything in English. The symposium is everything in English. Yes. So we'll be there, and we'll send more information. Okay. Jusara started a new book on Tuesdays called Empty Lives, right? I believe you studied 2 chapters, right, Zoraida? Yes,
Well, that's on Zoom.
it's on Zoom.
It's
Yes,
not, it's not.
On Tuesday.
on Tuesdays at noon. Yes, called Empty Lives. It's a book by Joana de Angelis, Spirit Joana de Angelis, through Divaldo Franco. Yes, it's a beautiful book. Yes, beautiful lessons. And this Sunday is the 5th Sunday of the month. So theoretically, we'll have some special, and we don't. So we are going to study the gospel according to Spiritism. Okay. Elmo is going to conduct the studies. And our book club, that's every Wednesday at 7 p.m. We are going to discuss chapter 2, part 2 of the book 50 years later. All right, this is also through Zoom. Okay. And we're going to ask Carol now to do our final prayer.
Sure. Thank you, John. And thank you, Philip. And thank you, everyone. Great, great evening. Infinite Creator, Supreme Intelligence, all goodness, all grace, we are grateful to be together this evening for our study of the Spirit's book, The Law of Labor, Chapter 3. We are grateful for what we have received and the comments and the questions as well. And we have learned that labor is a natural law. It is God's law. Labor is anything useful activity that helps us to evolve morally and intellectually. Jesus inspired us to love and help one another. We need to make an effort through our work to provide food, shelter, and safety. This is progress, and of course it varies throughout the world and varies throughout cultures. The more we evolve, the greater happiness and joy we will experience when we work. It is our own reward. However, we do need to accept our limitations. In the physical world, we must be paying attention to the rest as well. The spirit world, we will have to consider the mind needing a respite. We give thanks to our spiritual benefactors, the good spirits, the helpers, the healers who are with us, providing the information, the guidance, the direction that we can go to improve our life through our work, through our endeavoring, and through our labor. May we continue throughout the week with our prayers, with our studies, with our mindfulness, knowing that guidance is always available as we ask and we do our part. May we receive the love, light, and peace of Christ within us, guiding us, inspiring our hearts to be of service, to work more intently, to work toward perfection. May we humbly ask now for safety and protection as we go forth to family, friends, loved ones.